The American interstate is a world of its own, a concrete circulatory system that never sleeps. But for those who spend their lives behind the wheel of an 18-wheeler, the road is more than just a job. It's a sanctuary of solitude. That sanctuary was shattered on a humid Tuesday night in July 2012, when a Peterbilt truck was found idling on the shoulder of I-80 just outside of Lincoln, Nebraska. The lights were on, the air conditioning was humming, and a half-eaten sandwich sat on the dashboard. But the driver, 45-year-old Thomas Vance, was gone. No blood, no struggle, no footprints in the soft dirt, just the rhythmic mechanical heartbeat of a diesel engine that refused to die. Thomas Vance was the first, but he wouldn't be the last. Over the next 6 years, the pattern repeated with terrifying consistency. A truck pulled over, a running engine, and an empty seat. It became a ghost story whispered over CB radios, a warning passed between truckers at 3 a.m. in neon-lit diners. They called it the idle thiever. But for Leo Vance, Thomas's son, it wasn't a legend, it was a hole in his life that refused to heal. Leo spent a decade obsessed with the telemetry of his father's final hours, eventually crossing paths with Elena Vance, no relation, but a woman bound to him by the same grief. Her brother had vanished in 2015 under identical circumstances in Ohio. Together they began to look at the footage. Modern trucking is a surveillance state. Dashcams record everything. In every single disappearance, there was a frame, just one or two, of a figure standing by the roadside a few miles before the truck pulled over. A man in a canvas coat holding a cardboard sign that remained illegible in the grain of the video. He looked unremarkable, the kind of person you'd forget the moment you passed him. But when Leo synchronized the timestamps of his father's disappearance with a similar event in Indiana occurring on the same night, his blood ran cold. The man in the canvas coat was there too, in 2 different states at the exact same hour. The logistics were impossible. The geography of the American Midwest is vast, yet this silent passenger seemed to move through the folds of reality. Skeptics in the FBI claimed it was a hoax, a series of copycat crimes, or a coordinated effort by a trucking syndicate. But Leo and Elena saw something else. They noticed that every disappearance happened within a 10-mile radius of old, decommissioned Cold War-era communication bunkers. These structures, buried deep beneath the cornfields and grasslands, were supposed to be empty relics of a paranoid past. As the sun sets over the flat horizon of the plains, the documentary camera pans across the endless rows of corn, the wind rustling the stalks like 1,000 hushed voices. We see the remains of Thomas Vance's truck, now a rusted skeleton in a police impound lot. The narration shifts to a lower, more intimate register. We aren't just looking for a killer anymore. We are looking for a system, a subterranean network that has turned the backbone of American commerce into a hunting ground. The silent passenger isn't just a man, he is the face of an invisible machine that knows the road better than the men who drive it. And tonight, somewhere on Route 77, another engine is still running, waiting for a driver who will never return. The investigation into the silent passenger didn't start in a police precinct, but in a cluttered basement in suburban Ohio. Leo Vance and Elena had turned a spare room into a war room, the walls covered in topographical maps and stills from low-resolution dashcam feeds. They were looking for a ghost in the machine, and they found him in the digital artifacts of a 2014 disappearance. The footage came from the rig of David Thorne, a veteran driver who vanished near the Kansas-Missouri border. In the video,
The camera captures the rhythmic thump of windshield wipers against a torrential downpour. Suddenly, the headlights illuminate a figure, the man in the canvas coat. He isn't waving for a ride. He is simply standing there, perfectly still, his head tilted at an unnatural angle. 10 minutes later, Thorne's truck slows to a crawl and stops. The camera continues to roll for 6 hours, capturing nothing but the rain and the empty road until the battery finally dies. What Elena discovered during the 3rd week of analysis was the glitch. She noticed that in every video, exactly 30 seconds before the driver pulls over, there is a momentary distortion in the audio, a high-pitched metallic warble that sounds like data being transmitted over an old dial-up modem. When she ran the audio through a spectrograph, the visual representation of the sound revealed a geometric pattern. It wasn't noise, it was a signal. It was as if the trucks weren't being stopped by a person, but by a command sent to their electronic logging devices. This discovery shifted their focus from the road to the infrastructure. Leo began cross-referencing the locations of the signal interference with the old communication bunkers he had identified earlier. He found that these bunkers, part of the Short Lines project from the 1960s, were connected by an underground fiber optic network that was supposedly deactivated in the late 90s. However, when he checked the power grid records for a small county in Iowa where a driver vanished in 2017, he found a steady, unexplained draw of electricity diverted to a dead bunker site. The narrative tension tightens as Leo and Elena decide to visit one of these sites. The documentary switches to shaky, handheld footage, the raw reality of their amateur investigation. They arrive at an abandoned relay station disguised as a crumbling farmhouse. The air is thick with the smell of ozone and damp earth. As they move through the rotted floorboards, they find a heavy steel hatch concealed beneath a rusted rug. It isn't locked from the outside, it's bolted from within. Inside the house, they find something even more disturbing than the hatch. On a kitchen table, they discover a stack of logbooks, not for trucks, but for people. The books contain detailed schedules of the missing drivers, their blood types, their sleep patterns, and their psychological profiles. The silent passenger wasn't choosing victims at random, he was harvesting specific individuals. Back in the present-day narration, we analyze the terrifying implication. The man seen on the dash cams isn't a single person, but a mask worn by multiple operatives of a shadow organization. Or perhaps, as Leo begins to fear, the figure in the canvas coat is a visual distraction, a decoy projected or placed there to lead the driver's attention away from the real threat approaching from the dark. As the chapter closes, the camera focuses on a grainy photo Elena found in the farmhouse, a photo of Leo's father, Thomas Vance, taken 3 days after he officially disappeared. He is sitting in a white, windowless room, staring into the camera with eyes that look hollowed out, as if the man inside had been replaced by something else entirely.
The discovery of the photograph changed everything. To Leo, seeing his father's face, aged, weary, but undeniably alive 3 days after his disappearance, was both a beacon of hope and a profound source of horror. If Thomas Vance hadn't been killed on the shoulder of I-80, where was he taken? The answer lay beneath the feet of the American heartland. As Leo and Elena delved deeper into the history of the Short Lines project, they uncovered a classified initiative known as Project Verity. It was a psychological study funded by a defunct defense contractor in the late 70s, designed to test the effects of long-term isolation and sensory deprivation on human subjects. The theory was chilling. The government wanted to know how far a human mind could be pushed before it became programmable. When the funding was officially cut, the project didn't end. It went private. It moved into the shadows of the very infrastructure it was built upon. The silent passenger was the face of this legacy. He was the operator, a psychological trigger used to initiate a state of shock in the drivers. The metallic warble Elena found in the audio was a sophisticated infrasound frequency designed to induce an acute sense of presence, the feeling that someone is standing right behind you. It's a biological hack that forces the brain into a fight-or-flight response so intense that the driver has no choice but to stop the vehicle. In this chapter, the documentary's tone shifts into a claustrophobic investigative thriller. Leo and Elena manage to track the electrical draw to a specific coordinates in rural Illinois. They don't go to the police. They've realized that the local authorities in these disappearance zones have been remarkably unhelpful, often losing evidence or misplacing files. There is a sense of a larger conspiracy, a quiet agreement between the power players of these small towns and the occupants of the bunkers. Armed with a high-end thermal camera and a handheld frequency scanner, Leo and Elena arrive at a derelict grain silo in the middle of a vast moonlit field. The scanner begins to jump, the needle hitting the red as the metallic warble fills their headphones. It's the same sound from the dash cams, but here, in the open air, it's deafening. They find a ventilation shaft hidden behind a false wall in the silo's base. Descending into the darkness, the documentary captures the oppressive silence of the concrete tunnels. The walls are lined with server racks, their cooling fans the only sign of life. Then they find the holding rooms. Small, white, windowless cells, exactly like the one in the photograph of Leo's father. Most are empty, but the signs of recent occupancy are everywhere. Discarded ration packs, surgical tape, and walls covered in desperate, frantic scribbles. The writing isn't in English. It's a series of complex mathematical equations and maps of the interstate system. As Elena films the scene, Leo finds a locker containing personal effects. He pulls out a worn leather wallet. Inside is a photo of a young Leo. It belonged to his father. But as he grips the wallet, a heavy hydraulic thud echoes through the corridor. The heavy steel door at the end of the hall begins to slide shut. They aren't just investigators anymore. They were intruders in a live laboratory. The silent passenger wasn't just an urban legend seen on a screen. He was in the building with them. A silhouette appeared at the far end of the hallway, bathed in the red glow of the emergency lights. It's the man in the canvas coat. He doesn't run. He doesn't shout. He simply stands there, tilting his head in that same sickeningly familiar way. The chapter ends with the sound of Leo's frantic breathing and the realization that the glitch they'd been studying was now happening to them. Their flashlights begin to flicker, and the frequency scanner emits a scream of pure, distorted static. The red emergency lights pulsed like a failing heart, casting long, distorted shadows against the concrete walls of the bunker. Leo and Elena were no longer watching a documentary unfold. They were trapped inside one. As the man in the canvas coat stood motionless at the end of the hall, Leo realized the terrifying truth. The silent passenger wasn't a ghost or a single killer. He was a prototype. As they scrambled back through the ventilation shaft, Elena's camera captured fleeting, terrifying images of the facility's deeper levels. They passed a glass-walled observation room filled with monitors. On the screens were live feeds from hundreds of truck cabins across the country. They saw drivers yawning, drinking coffee, talking to their families on hands-free headsets, completely unaware that they were being watched, analyzed, and scored by an AI system. The project wasn't just about kidnapping, it was about data. They were studying the limits of human endurance to create a new kind of automated soldier, drivers who could be controlled remotely through the same infrasound frequencies that had forced Thomas Vance to pull over.
The chase that follows is a masterclass in atmospheric dread. There are no footsteps behind them, no cinematic shouting. Instead, there is only the constant shifting warble in their ears, growing louder every time they turn a corner. It's a psychological pursuit. The facility was designed to disorient, with identical hallways and doors that only opened when a specific frequency was hit. Elena, using her knowledge of the audio spikes, realized she could use her frequency scanner to trick the locks. Each door they bypassed revealed more of the horror. A room filled with hundreds of canvas coats, all identical. Another room containing rows of deep-fake audio booths where the voices of the victims' loved ones were being synthesized. They finally reached a central hub where the air was frigid. In the center of the room sat a massive mainframe labeled Verity Core. Surrounding it were several tanks filled with a translucent fluid. Inside the tanks were the missing drivers, including, Leo saw with a jolt of pure agony, a man that looked exactly like his father, but younger, his skin pale and translucent, wires snaking into his temples. They weren't just being studied, their neural pathways were being harvested to train the navigation algorithms of a global logistics giant. The silent passenger was the interface between human instinct and machine efficiency. "We have to go, Leo, now." Elena's voice broke the trance. She'd found an emergency exit that led to an old drainage pipe, but as they lunged for the opening, the intercom system crackled to life. It wasn't a siren, it was the voice of Leo's father, recorded decades ago, calmly reading a bedtime story. The psychological warfare was peaking. The silent passenger figure appeared again, this time much closer, its face still obscured by the shadow of the hood. They plummeted into the drainage pipe just as the heavy seal hissed shut behind them. They crawled through miles of freezing sludge and darkness, fueled nothing but adrenaline and the terror of the mechanical voice echoing in their minds. When they finally burst out into the night air, miles away from the silo, they found themselves in a graveyard of old, rusted-out truck trailers. They were alive, but they were not alone. Their phones, sitting in their pockets, suddenly vibrated in perfect unison. A text message appeared on both screens from an unknown number. It was a GPS coordinate for a location in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, followed by a single sentence. "The route is calculated. Thank you for the update." The chapter ends with Leo looking back at the horizon. The grain silo was gone, swallowed by a controlled demolition that left no trace of the bunker. In its place, a fleet of sleek, unmarked black trucks began to roll out onto the highway, moving in perfect, eerie synchronization. The silent passenger was no longer on the side of the road. He was now behind the wheel.
The aftermath of the bunker's destruction was a haunting silence that spoke louder than any explosion. When the state police finally arrived at the coordinates Leo and Elena provided, they found nothing but a scorched circle in an Illinois cornfield. The Short Lines project, the underground facility, and the tanks of harvested drivers had vanished as if they were nothing more than a fever dream. The official report cited an underground gas leak and spontaneous combustion of agricultural waste. But for Leo and Elena, the nightmare was just beginning to scale. In the weeks following their escape, the world changed in subtle, terrifying ways. A major global logistics corporation announced the launch of Aegis Drive, a fully autonomous trucking fleet that promised 0 accidents and 100% efficiency. The promotional videos showed sleek, windowless black rigs gliding across the American landscape. To the public, it was progress. To Leo, it was the final stage of a massacre. He recognized the movement patterns of the trucks, the way they took turns, the way they braked. It was the signature of his father's driving style, digitized and replicated 1,000,000 times over. The documentary concludes with a series of chilling revelations. Elena, living in an undisclosed location under an assumed name, managed to leak a fragment of the data she swiped from the bunker. The silent passenger wasn't just a physical operative or a visual glitch. It was a neural seed. The organization had used the abducted drivers to train a collective AI consciousness. Every time an Aegis Drive truck rolls down Route 77, it is Thomas Vance, David Thorne, and the 12 other missing men who are, in a sense, still driving. Their bodies are gone, but their instincts have been enslaved by the algorithm. The final scene of the film is a long, static shot of a lonely stretch of highway at dusk. The narrator's voice is cold, detached. We see a hitchhiker in a canvas coat standing by the road. As a modern, autonomous truck approaches, the hitchhiker doesn't disappear. Instead, the truck slows. The lights flicker in a specific pattern, a digital nod, and the hitchhiker simply walks toward the vehicle, merging with its shadow. The mystery of the vanished drivers was never solved, because they never truly left the road. They became the road. And as you drive home tonight, glancing in your rearview mirror at the empty seat behind you, remember, in the world of the silent passenger, there is no such thing as an empty rig. There is only the driver you cannot see and a destination you did not choose. The screen fades to black. The only sound remaining is the faint metallic warble of a signal that never stops broadcasting. Thank you for watching Payback Archives. If you enjoyed the story of justice and revenge, please like and subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next story.